I've done a bunch of videos on sleeper cars, but most of those videos have been on cars that from factory are already sleepers. That means that if you're a car person, you probably know that they're quite quick cars anyway, so they're not sleepers to everyone. So in this video I want to talk about 10 cars that are certainly not fast cars at all, but they provide the perfect platform to turn into sleeper cars. Oh, and by the way, they all cost under £5,000. If you like this video and want to see more like it, do hit the like button, subscribe as well if you're new. Without further ado, let's get into the video. Let's get this video off with the Daewoo Matiz, a plucky little hatchback which we used to take the mick out of all the time when I was at school. I'm not sure if any of my friends actually ended up having one of these as their first cars, but even then, for whatever reason, it used to be the brunt of many a boys' school joke. But what's funny is that it's 1 litre inline-4 engine which makes 63 brake horsepower and does 0 to 60 in 12.5 seconds is way faster than my first car, which was definitely slower to 60 than that, but let's gloss over that point. These will cost you around 1.2k at the bottom end right now, and for that you're getting a ridiculous little platform for a sleeper build. It weighs just 853 kilograms and looks like an old pensioner's runaround, and yet I've seen people drop a Yamaha R1 engine into them as well as an Opel Omega V6 block, and the aftermarket isn't huge, but there are still enough performance parts available to get it to stiffen up around corners. I genuinely reckon this could be a proper little sleeper for the money. Next up we're going slightly bigger with the 3rd generation Fiat Panda, a small city utility hatchback which already comes in some cooler specs like the 4x4. It can be as slow as having the 1.2 litre inline-4 block producing 68 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in 14.3 seconds, and even slower in some other specs. But what's key is that it's incredibly unassuming, but also has that perfect tuning arm of its own business with readily available parts, a bath. I went through owners forums and found at least a couple of examples of 4x4 Pandas getting the engines and gearboxes from the 500 a bath, giving them a bunch more power, more tuning potential, and definite sleeper status. All-wheel drive and a minimum of 140 brake horsepower in a frame that small is a recipe for a lot of fun. Add on some Bilstein suspension, upgrade the brakes, put some good rubber on it, and you've got yourself a pretty sick little sleeper in my books. No one's going to expect you to violate them off the line in a Panda, which you can get for under £5,000. This car may be too well known amongst car people, but I had to include the Dacia Sandero in this video. Another slow little unassuming hatch with its 1.2 litre inline-4 engine making 71 brake horsepower, taking it to 60 in 14 seconds. This car was popularised by the Top Gear boys, and stick around for another Top Gear classic later in this video. If you've watched Misha's channel, you'll have seen the racing Dacia Logan that ran in the Nürburgring 24 hours, proving there's enough of an aftermarket for these cars, and actually online I could very easily find a bunch of good parts for the Sandero, including KW coilovers, bigger brakes, and performance clutches, all quite important on a sleeper car. They start at around £2,500, and there is already some precedent set in that there was a Sandero RS made available for some markets, but not here in the UK. It also shares its platform with the 4th gen Renault Clio, meaning though it might be a total waste of money, it's not out of the realms of possibility to fit a Clio RS engine into one of these and surprise people at traffic lights. We're onto the Peugeot 1007 now, with its 1.4 litre inline-4 block producing 75 brake horsepower, which you get to 60 in 13.9 seconds. It looks quite strange, but those looks were actually designed by Pininfarina, which is pretty insane, so I thought it would make an interesting platform to turn into a sleeper build with that sliding door for access. Now what's great about the 1007 is that it sits on the same platform as the Peugeot 206, so some of the engine options are also straight out of the 206. Now the 206 is a car that has had quite a few fun engine modifications over the years, including simply going for a Super 1600 tune on the 1.6 or getting more power out of the 2 litre, and in some cases engine swapping. I've seen a 3 litre turbocharged V6 block in the 206 for example. It stands to reason then that with enough of a dream and a wallet to make it happen, you could do the same to the Peugeot 1007 and build yourself a ridiculous little sleeper that probably no one else on the roads would have, spending just £1,500 at the bottom end to get your project car. The Honda Jazz is a proven platform for modifications and certainly makes a good case for being one of the easier cars to turn into a sleeper on this list. You can get it with a 1.4 litre inline-4 block producing 98 brake horsepower and doing 0 to 60 in 11.1 seconds, and get hold of the 2nd generation model for as little as £2,000. But of course, as is a Honda hatchback, there is just one engine for it, the K20. Get a K20 in one of these just like DMO did, and the world is your oyster, given the wealth of tuning opportunities and tuning potential out of that block. You might have seen DMO's Jazz running theoretically 1,200 300 brake horsepower. That's exactly what I'm talking about with one of these cars, where you would typically expect to see a first time driver in one, or someone who just wants a useful runaround car. It does have a huge aftermarket as well. Imagine putting some BC Racing coilovers, the hard race or spoon ARBs, and the hybrid racing short shifter onto one of these. A sleeper build is completely possible on a Jazz. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are, do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. I'd really appreciate it. And let me know in the comments down below, is there any other car that you would just not expect to be fast? A car that you could just turn into the most ridiculous sleeper? I'd love to hear it in the comments down below. I promised another Top Gear car in this video, and here I am delivering. It's the Suzuki Liana, which those of you who watched Top Gear in the early years will know was the reasonably priced car that stars used to drive around the track. I'm not sure which engine they use on Top Gear, but it might have been the 1.6 litre inline 4 producing 105 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in 11.3 seconds. You can get these now for around £1,000, as this car was a bit of a sales failure as a result of its bland design and the difficulty of actually working on its engine, so it certainly ticks the right boxes to be a sleeper, but what can you actually swap into it? Well, it's important to remember that the Liana was the basis for the iconic Suzuki Aereo P950 Pikes Peak Special, and in markets outside of the UK it had more interesting specs, including all-wheel drive and some larger engines like the 2 and 2.3 litre inline 4s. I've seen turbocharged examples producing over 200 wheel horsepower, and honestly that would be enough to trouble a bunch of cars on the roads in one of these. The third generation Nissan Cube in my head would make for an amazing little sleeper build, with its 1.6 litre inline 4 engine producing 108 brake horsepower and doing 0 to 60 in 11.5 seconds given its very strange looks. I can only find one article on this, so I can't fully confirm it, but it seems that at some point a company by the name of American Muscle turned a previous gen Cube into a monster, pushing out over 1,000 brake horsepower, which is just ridiculous in what is effectively a box you can buy for under 5k. The good thing about going for a third gen is that it sits on the same platform as the Nissan Duke, and on owners forums there are a bunch of discussions around whether the MR16 DDT block out of the performance focused Nismo Duke will fit into the Cube. The resounding answer is yes, though not without some work on mounting positions, an ECU swap and some modifications to ensure the drive shafts can actually be driven, but for me, a performance Cube pushing out mad power would be one of the funniest and most unique sleeper builds that you could do. It's the car I spend most of my life stuck behind, the Toyota Prius, a well-loved car by Uber drivers around the world for its economy, being the world's top-selling hybrid car so far. The third gen comes with a 1.8 litre inline 4 engine with an electric motor, producing a combined 134 brake horsepower and taking it to 60 in 10.1 seconds. This is a popular car for engine swaps, it must be said, meaning there are plenty of examples to learn from, but also maybe taking away from how different your sleeper build might be. Either way, it's a Prius, they're everywhere, and to be the one person cruising along with a Hellcat swapped Prius would be actually mental, which is exactly what American racing headers did to one of these. There are also examples of Honda K24s being swapped into these, and a friend of mine has also proven that the aftermarket will let you modify the rest of the Prius however you really want to. If there's any car on this list that people aren't going to look twice at, it's a Prius, so you're definitely going incognito in one of these. I love the Rover 75, a proper old school vibe to this cheap luxury car. It literally looks like a stately home on the interior, and with its 2.5 litre V6 engine it's already putting out around 174 brake horsepower, which you get to 60 in 8.2 seconds, which I personally find quite surprising in and of itself. But that's not true sleeper power in these, and it is possible to make something mental out of a 75, as was proven by retro sports cars, who managed to turn the sportier MG ZT variant of the car into a monster with a 4.6 litre V8 block out of the Ford Mustang, which puts out 315 brake horsepower from standard. As this was possible with the ZT, it's clearly not impossible to do the same with the Rover, and what a silly little car you would have. One of Rover's most sedate and most comfort-focused luxury cars, a car that was used to ferry MPs around in, with a Mustang V8 up front ready to scare people off the line. Again, given the start at £2,000, not a bad price to start your project. I had to get one of the original fast estates into this video, the Volvo 850, which in T5 spec was already pretty fast and cool even if it wasn't the T5R, with its 2.3 litre turbocharged inline 5 block producing 225 brake horsepower and managing 0 to 60 in 7.2 seconds. That means not much needs to be done to get this aging classic into some ridiculous levels of performance, and if you go on forums you'll see owners quite easily getting 300 brake horsepower out of them on the same turbo with basic tuning, and with more comprehensive builds getting over 400 brake horsepower. That's not bad at all for a project car that you can buy for as little as £2,000. It doesn't just come as an estate, by the way, it came as a saloon too, so go for whatever floats your boat, but I personally think a fast Volvo estate is is the way to go, and given the cult following for these cars, you'll get a lot of love from fellow Volvo owners. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, do hit the like button and subscribe as well if you're new. Massive thanks to the patrons for their support, and to you guys as well for watching. If you watch another video again on some other cheap and pretty fast sleeper cars, click up here and subscribe down here.